Yeah, trying that Christmas dog.
Oh, God, I'm so nervous. Give me a drink of water. Woo!
That's great.
Can I get a hug or something?
What are you doing, Mama?
Devon, what's happening? Come here, let me see. Let me see your necklace. Devon, hey, let me see your necklace. Let me see your necklace. Devon, let me see your necklace. Come tell me about Disney World. Was it Disneyland or Disney World? Huh? Come tell me now, because I get confused sometimes.
Sally.
Hi, Val.
Hey, how you doing, babe? Hey, yeah. How you doing, babe? Devon. Hi. How's my Anthony?
Oh, my God.
How are you?
Hi.
Oh,
Nice to meet you.
Good.
oh,
Don't
my
make me start crying.
God.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Lamar. How are you?
Oh, my God.
How are you? Good. So, I look like my mom, huh? Yes, you do. Don't fall apart all this now.
Val, this is my big
Hi. Hey, Devon, I'm gonna give you an hour.
You just call me Faye.
Okay.
I love that. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
How are you?
This is Venus.
Nice to meet you.
Venus.
Hi.
Hi. Sweetie, I'm Juliet. Hi. How are you? Good.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. How are you?
Oh, good to meet you.
Hey.
We just got here.
Oh,
We've been sitting in traffic
That's
for
Sasha.
hours.
my
Yes.
goodness.
She's
Just
cute.
got
She's
here.
so pretty.
I'm good.
What a nice reunion.
Yes. Just walked in the door. Just walked in the door.
Everybody's on.
Hi, nice to meet you. Must be Bridget.
That's Bridget.
I didn't catch you.
More to come.
Just got here, so this is
You haven't met Emily yet.
Your first introduction to
great. No problem.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
I like Florida. I give you a big kiss. Oh, same here. It's so windy out here. I always did. Yeah, I'll go with him because it was quite good. Yeah. Huh? No, she wasn't there. Alfred said she had.
I have a lot.
Well, maybe they'll just take a look.
Yeah, yeah.
Chris?
So come over here, young lady.
Get out or else.
You're expected.
Oh, really? Yeah. Are you going to?
Why are you looking at it like that? It's great.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Fell left out.
What? Somebody's right outside of this step. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, because you have my phone. The thing was, I have my kid was in college, right? He had a girlfriend in Philly, you know, and they were on the phone with each other all night. I had a $120 phone bill. I said, I know how to solve this problem. He went out with his aunt to help her take some things out of
Where's my bag?
Probably on the couch right there. You got your bag.
Sasha, what kind of drink do you like?
Sasha, come here, sweetheart.
Faye?
I brought you
Does
something.
it matter what kind of drink? Oh, you want
Enjoy it.
Well, now that the moment has passed, I guess I can have my wine.
Yeah, I think so. You've done a good job. Now, when my mother gets here, that's the next step.
Okay.
You gotta be ready. So you should go ahead and eat now. Because that's what takes some energy out of it.
What time is she coming?
We don't know. It'll be a surprise for everybody.
Why, who like it?
Oh, busted up.
I went to the club. Oh, beautiful.
Where mine?
In the bottom, I can't find it. I dig for it later.
See, look for mine while you down there.
Oh, they're all in here.
Oh, okay.
When I get ready to say goodnight,
I want mine.
Oh, where's the love here? Where's the love here?
Look at your hair. What happened? Miracle grow.
They missed their flight. They got bumped off twice.
Get out of here.
We bought our tickets. That's why we're here.
Oh my, you came right from the Carolinas.
We met them in the airport, but since our tickets were bought tickets, we already had seats. We came on.
Oh my goodness. Oh, so they've been out there since early this morning?
We didn't think they're supposed to be in
Do you think they got on anything?
Because really, they should have been here. What time is it?
Oh
If
my.
they got on that last flight, they should be on their way right now. I know she was beside herself.
Oh, of course.
Bless you.
Yeah, finally. Right?
Yeah,
Long time. It stayed on. That's over. You win. What time is it?
Check out that page.
I'm not quite so
wrong way. What's that? Went the wrong way.
I was sick with that story though.
So where is he back in school? You like it?
I know. You know, we always travel on the days so we can get in and out, in and out.
That's our wrong.
That is.
Trying to get here together.
12 something. We stayed there until the wait for them for that one. They didn't get on that one. So they really on that third one.
So maybe I'm quite
Your mother does not yet realize that I like
Same thing.
Oh, and then we'll be just friends, but that's the only thing we'll be able to do to keep her straight. I'm sure she's still working in the pit. I know. She's probably fabulous now. She is. I really expect her for Christmas. Oh, really? What was the next one? They should be on their way here right now if they got on the last one. They got on. I hope they got on. Oh, yeah.
People are flying now.
She hasn't called, so I'm assuming that she was flying away.
People are really like that.
Great.
Does she like that?
Everything I need to cook is cooked.
I don't know how I ended up on this morning because she said, maybe somebody else better than me.
Well, Ebony's the official cleaner.
I got the world's worst stove.
Miranda, this is Chan, my oldest daughter, and her friend. A walk. It's Erin. Erin. Hi. How are you? Faye. Faye. Nice to meet you. Hold me right on. You keep trying to get up those walls.
How are you?
Hi. I'm doing some live. Oh, boy, it's a really a good job.
Hey. All right. Yeah, good.
Oh, where were you? I hope I picked you up. You go by the house? Oh, you didn't go at all. But we were late, so you look different.
Who was this, mister?
I was saying.
What's up, business?
Where
my buddy at?
Nobody
can be on my diet today.
Oh, no, I'm not. But that's
I don't think so.
It is.
It's 2 pounds in the refrigerator. Diet and bacon.
It tastes like diet.
Are you ready for all this chicken over today?
Well, they look like she's ready.
I've had to still prepare for it.
I know.
Not like it's.
I'm sorry.
I just think we got a ring diet.
Yeah, that's what we're drinking and going and driving me crazy. What's your problem? Let's get together, let's go.
But you know what, Joanne has been calling me, I'd say, maybe there has been 3 days, out of the last 3 days.
They're so excited.
But if she didn't call, when she doesn't call, I tell Sasha, I say, oh, I missed her call. Oh, that's calling them.
Oh, that one was yours? Yeah, she was 3 days old.
Sasha, Sasha, this is diet, that's why everything's been on that diet.
I dressed her. I had everything else. Not forget. you know, I mean, you can't even explain that, you
When
know?
I first,
But see, if I had been a little
oh,
more,
God.
well, you never gave me, I was like, ran the hospital. I was like, 18, 17. I was young. Ronnie was young too. And, my mother went and bought this outfit.
Yeah, that's,
My mother was sickly. Y'all remember how my mother was sickly, you know? Yeah. So I'll go with the other one. No, I'll go with the other one. And the nurse, when I got her, the nurse came and put me in her in this little
I got that too.
When I first started out,
I went to the hospital.
I don't think you got it dressed up. Yeah. That's qualified, every 10 years.
Warehouse on record. But the problem that I ran into was I didn't have a name. All I had was that I was born in this hospital, and you can't get medical records for anybody other than yourself. And I didn't have a name. And since I was a baby, the records would be under my mother's name. So I finally just talked to the man, appealed to his, gentle side, and he said, well, I'll throw up my hands and, you look. But after a couple days of looking, there wasn't anything, I couldn't find anything, and I went back to Florida, and I asked him to please, thank you very much. I asked him to please continue working.
You sure like that?
So, I asked him to continue looking, and this time he just looked under all the babies that were born on January 17th of '61, and he called me one night and he said, I've got your mother's name. And
Isn't that something?
How did you find him though? How did you find him?
just a lot of call, just know Department of Health, I
Did
called,
someone just remembered his name?
the name of the guy who had the records?
Yeah.
No, I called down to Albany, and I called and called and called. Before I called to Albany, Georgia, I called to Albany, New York, and made a few phone calls, and they have something like a register or health or something. And when I talked to them, I said, I'm ill, I need some past medical records from a hospital that's no longer in business. So they gave me a couple numbers, and finally I got a name of a man he's called recorder of documents, and that's what he does for a living. He goes around to defunct businesses or institutions and keeps the records, for a certain number of years, and charges a fee to get them. And I think some ludicrous amount, like $80 an hour to look through the warehouse. But, again, he only charged me for 1 hour, and it took days. I lucked out. Actually, he gave me the name before I even mailed him the money, mailed him a check for the money. He called me one night, it was like 12 o'clock at night, and he said, I've got your mother's name. He gave it to me. So that was my first step.
He's trying to get up.
Don't jump on me now. Come on down this way. I got a funny feeling you want to jump.
I know what I want. I want to freedom.
Down this way. Ebony, if you jump, I'm gonna catch you, honey. You just come down this way. Ebony.
Come on.
So then, after that.
Okay, the next step, the first thing I did that night was I called my brother, who at that time was a policeman, 42nd precinct, which is in the Bronx. And I asked him, could he have somebody send a car over to this 294th Avenue because that's the last address. But whoever he sent just said, the building's not there anymore. But it was just because the guy didn't want to go all the way out to Brooklyn.
You have cousins living in that building.
Yes, that's what he told me. And my next step was, I went to visit, after I couldn't find any information under that name, I went to visit the agency that I was adopted at, which is Spence Chapin. It's on like East 94th or something. And when I went there, they wouldn't see me. They just said that anybody that's looking for their mother after so many years needs counseling or whatever.
Oh, that's what you was
Yeah, well, council or whatever. But, what they also offer is a registry. And it says like if you're looking for your mother and your mother's looking for you, and both of you consent, yeah, they'll get information. So I, put my name in the registry, and then I was still here, just visiting for a couple weeks doing some research. So I thought another thing would be, I tried a different approach. I called the agency and I said, I met Veronica, but I still have some questions that she didn't answer. So I led them to believe that I had already found her, and then they said they'd see me. So when I went to see him, and I set up the appointment, the lady sent for my folder, and she had it out on her desk. So I'm sitting across from her at the desk, and she's saying, what kind of questions did you want to know? I said, well, she never told me, did she have any sisters or brothers? So they said she had one brother and 4 sisters, or 3 sisters. She was the oldest of 5. So while I'm sitting across, my eyes
that was in the
are
record?
straining.
Wow.
My eyes are straining, and that's when I saw Albany, Georgia. And when I saw Albany, Georgia, I didn't really get too much more information from them. They told me how old she was, maybe just some other little minor things. Her mother was sick, they said, just a couple other minor things. So that's where I took my search. After that, Albany, Georgia. And, Boutique Funeral Home, I talked to those. I focused on a couple of the old black restaurants that had been in town for a long time, like barbecue stands. And I went to Daugherty County Media Center. They had what you call city directories for everybody that lived in that town. So I went back to like 1959, because the agency told me that the family moved here shortly before I was born. So that's why I went back to like maybe 59. I went to Girls High and looked through old yearbooks, Clara Barton School or something. I got it all written down. I was in Girls High. Let's see, I was looking for Veronica. Yeah.
See, when Veronica came to New York, she had already graduated. She graduated from Bakersfield High School. Camilla High School.
Right, in Georgia.
Yeah, in Georgia. When she came here, she had already graduated.
The big library down Manhattan, so I thought another approach would be phone books. So I used to go and sit in a microfiche room with the old phone books from like 1960, 1961. So what happened was that when I looked in the phone book in 61, the phone was under Veronica Knight's name at 294 Green Avenue. Yeah. And the next year it was also. But after that, it was under Bobby's name. So it was 1963. So that's how I got his name, and I had his name to work with. So now I followed Bobby Knight from place to place as the years went on through the phone book, but it got difficult because there were like maybe 10 Bobby Knights in there after that. So I wrote to the one that I thought was it, from following it around, and the lady told me that he had passed away, and she didn't know if, he had any sisters. So I just kind of let that end of it go as far as Bobby Knight. All in all, I've got letters that I sent to Social Security Administration, that I sent to, initially the people that took me from the hospital was Graham Wyndham Services, and they're not in business anymore. I went through their records, talked to a former administrator. I even talked to the doctor that delivered me. So he was an intern at that time, but he didn't know anything.
It gave me the impression when they came to pick you up at the hospital, right? I brought you and the nurse brought the baby downstairs. And we gave you to this lady, but gave me the impression that you was gonna be with this family. But that was really an adoption agency.
Well, I'm not sure what happened because I wasn't adopted until I was 22 months old. I didn't, the people that
so
adopted
that was
me,
adoption agency.
and they were, actually, Graham Wyndham Services places foster kids. They don't usually do adoptions. So I must have been in a foster home till I was 22 months, and at that time I went to Spence Chapin, and what happened is my father worked for Spence Chapin, and he would call my mother and say, I have a little baby that I don't have a place for right now, that we can't place, so can you get a bed ready? And they were in their 50s at the time. They didn't have, any children in the house. It was just them two. So, this particular time he called and said, get a bed ready, and I went there, 22 months, and after a couple of weeks, my father said, okay, I have someplace for her. And my mother said, do we have to let her go? So that's how I ended up with them. And they also adopted 3 other children.
All of us were adopted, and actually, we 22 months. I was 22. The rest of them were younger. I have one brother that was 6. He was the last one, but the other 2 sisters were younger when they were adopted. They were babies. But that's how 4 children they raised. They were good people, but the only thing is they never let me forget I was adopted. Not so much my mother, my father. And I think it's because he didn't have any children of his own, so he didn't understand. And that might have had something to do with it.
So I would say like in your, that 8, 9, you remember those years.
8, 9? Oh yeah, I can
So
remember 8, 9.
how was your life then?
As I said, my life was great. Piano lessons, Girl Scouts, we went to Radio City Music Hall, we went to plays, we went downtown, we saw the Rockettes, we ice skated every Saturday. We did all of those things. My mother did not work. You know, you come in from school, you have hot chocolate and homemade brownies. She was that type of a person. That type of life was good. I did not want anything, but as I said, when there was an argument or something, my father always said, I took you in when no one else wanted you. So I was not like that, you know. But,
Which is the thing that parents sometimes say when they get angry.
yeah. Oh yeah,
And then
I'm sure.
they say,
I'm
they're
sure.
sorry seconds later.
When Sasha was born 14 years ago, I decided then, at that time, that I wanted to look for my mother. Before then, it seemed insignificant, but I mean, it bothered me, but not enough to actually look for her. And I can remember I used to say all the time to my mother that if my mother ever looked for me, I would be angry at her for what she had done. And my mother, on the other hand, would say, you never know circumstances. You know, you can't be like that. So she was very supportive. When Sasha was born, luckily I had a husband that worked for Federal Express, so we could fly back and forth for $15. And I lived in Florida then, and I flew back and forth here constantly to do paperwork and look and search and that type of thing. Spend my days at the library.
Is that when you came across the phone records?
When I was,
That's what I
it
was.
was 14 years ago. It was 14 years ago when I looked. When I started looking, it was 14 years ago. All my things are dated like 84, 85, 83. So at the time I was looking, she was sick. She was very sick. So it just got to a point, I knew I had all this information, but I couldn't quite put my finger on where she was. So it was getting to the point of an emotional roller coaster. I'd get a lead, contact somebody, or, spend this astronomical amount of money to come here and actually knock on a door, only to have somebody say, I'm sick, There was one lady that lived in Albany. Her name was Georgiana Knight. And she actually lived in Albany, Georgia, and moved to Brooklyn. And I thought
that was
I knew this was the person. And I actually shared with my adopted mother at that time, she was living, that, I went there and this lady was like, no, I'm sorry. She was just there was so many things. She was the right age. She had the right number of daughters. Everything was, she was an older lady, but she just was not it. So it got to the point that I said, this emotional roller coaster is just not working. So I put everything up, and I refused to have anything to do with it for the last, 14 years.
Your adopted mother passed in Florida or here?
In Florida. 90, 91. But, my friends would see a talk show. This one would see a talk show and she'd say, I have this number I wrote down for you, And or this private investigator, here's his number, So she'd always have something and I'd say, I can't handle it. And then in August I switched jobs, and when I got on my new job, we had the internet on our computers at my desk, and I was just kind of fooling around. And they had like a people finder, sort of like a phone directory. So if you have a listed phone, your name and address will show up on this directory for any place in the country.
Wow.
So I asked the guy next to me, the office next to me, how hard would it be to download information from New York City? And he said 2 seconds. And he said, give me a name. So First, I had him put in Veronica Night. He downloaded about 20 names, and I sent out 20 letters, form letters that said for information for Veronica Night, and I think I gave a birth date and that address, Green Avenue. And out of that, I got one response, and this lady was really nice. Her name was Veronica. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm not the person. She went into detail. She sent a beautiful card, and she's like, I wish you luck. And that was it, out of 20.